Hi, and welcome back. This is ManchTalk, and I'm Tammy Simmons. I'm your host. Joining me today is a Ward 4 resident. His name is Luke Mroz. Luke and I spent some time together on Election Day, and we got talking about the new police scanners and the impact the possibility of encrypting communications would have on the public, and whether we should do that or not. And I asked him to join me today, and here he is, and I'm glad you came.
Great. Thanks for having me.
No problem. So, for those of you watching who don't know anything about this, last year sometime, or in the past year, the aldermen voted to spend $5.8 million on new radios, which may seem like a lot of money, but things cost money. One of the benefits is that all the departments would be all working on the same radio system. So if the fire department had to just, connect to the police, it was all going to work together. There's increase in towers, some new technology, things like that. The Board of Mayor and Aldermen approved it, and that's fine. And the equipment was purchased recently, and just now, in the past couple of weeks, the Manchester Police Department has switched over to the new radio system and has decided that instead of leaving the communications open as they have been all along, they were going to encrypt their communications. So what this means is there's groups like Manchester Information, there's a Facebook page, and there's the Union Leader has reporters, and MUR and NH1, they all have reporters that listen to police scanners to see what's going on. I mean, that's how you get, on the scene live at an accident or in a major fire or a hostage situation or whatever the case may be. By encrypting the language, the only people who will know where the police are going are the police. So Luke and I are going to talk about the pros and cons of that, and what's common practice in other communities, what maybe we could do going forward, what we should expect as citizens, and so on. So I'm going to let you give me your opinion on what you think.
Sure,
you're just the resident.
So
just the resident.
So this is a new change to previous precedent. Mm-hmm. So as of September 9th, the Manchester Police are now encrypting their channels. Mm-hmm. Like you said, what this means is that reporters, journalists don't have access to real-time information about incidents and crime that are happening.
Right.
This is a change from the way that things have been for decades. Right. This new digital technology allows encryption now, but the standard before was open access. Any citizen could buy a police scanner before and listen to the dispatch talk to police officers. And now, with the advent of software applications on people's phones,
I was going to say, I listen on the phone.
People can jump in and listen to police scanners, police transmissions, right via their phone without buying, specific hardware. This, for me at least, raises a lot of concerns. There is crime in my community, and before the encryption occurred, the Union Leader, and specifically for me personally, the Manchester Information media organization posts straight to Facebook when crimes or incidents happen around Manchester. Yep. And having that almost real-time information is very valuable as a concerned resident.
Yep, I have to agree. I follow the same Facebook pages, and anytime that something's going on, anytime I either see a different post on Facebook that somebody says, there's all these police cars at such and such street, or you hear the sirens, or you notice a large police presence in your neighborhood. One of the first things I always do is, let's go over to Facebook and there's the Manchester Information page, and there's a couple little local media pages. And usually, pretty easily, you could find one that would say, there's a motor vehicle accident on Hanover Street. And you're like, okay, it's a motor vehicle accident on Hanover Street. And off you go on your merry way. The times that it is, there's a lot of good reasons to know that information from a resident perspective. I live in West Manchester. I live in what I feel is a safe neighborhood. However, in the past year, I don't even know if you realize this, in the past year, we had a huge heroin operation operating directly across the street from my house where a girl was shot. Well, all of us were following it on Facebook and, listening to the scanner to find out, is there a guy running through my backyard that I have to be concerned about, because we didn't know. So while sometimes it may seem like people are just being nosy and want to know what's going on, people also want to feel safe that they're not in danger because they are unaware of what's going on their street or in the street behind them and so on.
Right. So before, news organizations would listen to the scanners, and now that they've been cut off from this information, they now have to rely on eyewitness accounts, people contacting them to let them know. Also, they do rely now on like the public information officer at the Manchester Police, who I believe I read puts out an average of 8 press releases a week. So if you get 1 or 2 press releases a day, that's not real-time information. And, you know, that information is not necessarily always available when the press asks for it.
That's not going to be timely. That's going to be later that day. I mean, already I've noticed not faulting anything, but I notice quite often there'll be stories in the Union Leader or on MUR that say there was this incident and the police are investigating, and then there's never a follow-up story. You're always like, did they catch the guy? Did they arrest somebody? Or I don't know. So now not only do we have we're not going to have follow-up stories because there's not going to be the first story because nobody's going to know that the police are responding to, you know, a shooting in such and such neighborhood. And the only people who are going to really know, like you said, are the people who actually are witnessing the crime.
Right.
I know in the paper, Chief Willard said, you know, there's nothing to be worried about. We're not trying to hide anything. And I'm not saying that they're intentionally trying to hide anything, but that they cited 2 things. They cited officer safety, and I get it. I get that, you know, the police need to be able to be safe as well. You know, you don't need people knowing exactly what the police are doing if they are investigating. I know that there's pushback all the time from the police about citizens recording them. You know, it's probably not a comfortable thing, but this is the nature of the beast. You know, I think most people recording get that they can't interfere with the situation. They have to record from a distance. But we do have laws in New Hampshire that explicitly say it's okay to record the police. They can't tell you you can't. And then they cite privacy issues, which I found a little odd because I don't ever recall them ever using anybody's name on a scanner. You know, you didn't listen to the scanner and they said, oh, we're going to Joe Smith's house and, you know, see what's going on there. I mean, if somebody wanted to go out and, yes, they used my address and they wanted to Google my address and find out who it was, but that's not really a privacy concern, I don't think. Or at least it doesn't outweigh the lack of information, in my opinion.
Right. So from what I've read about the privacy issue is police organizations around the country that have chosen to encrypt say that, you know, sometimes they call in criminal checks or transmit social security numbers. Some are not comfortable transmitting juveniles' names or, you know, reporting on mental health situations that are occurring. It's my understanding that at least some of the newer digital radio systems allow you to encrypt as you want in the moment, so you could turn encryption on and off. I'm not sure if that's how it is here in Manchester.
Well, I would hope that we've bought technology that is state of the art. We just spent $5.8 million, so I would assume that we would purchase something that, you know, isn't outdated.
Also, I've read that some other police departments, they're able to have separate channels, public and private, at the same time, and they just switch to another channel.
And that one could be encrypted. So one could be encrypted, and one could be non-encrypted, and the majority of the police communication would be in the non-encrypted. And then if they are in pursuit of somebody in a neighborhood and they don't want, you know, the very whereabouts of every police officer to be known to the public because they're trying to catch, you know, the bad guy, well, then they could do that on there. But at least we'd be aware that there's a situation at hand at the time that it was actually at hand.
Yeah, so I believe that it's just in the public interest for, you know, most of the communication to be open and then on an as-needed basis to switch over to the encrypted channel. As we discussed earlier, the New Hampshire State Police generally have chosen and made a comment on this and will be leaving their channels open, and then as needed, we'll jump to an encrypted channel, and they actually have a protocol where an officer needs to get approval from a supervisor to jump over to the encrypted channel.
So it's I mean, it's not like we're the only city that doesn't encrypt by far.
Yeah, and it's also interesting that some of these cities are claiming privacy concerns, but other cities are not claiming privacy
Right. So
concerns.
are those cities do they just
wrong?
not care about privacy?
Yeah.
I highly doubt that,
Yeah.
I highly doubt that the state police in New Hampshire could care less about privacy issues.
Right. So it seems to me very inconsistent that police departments are making a privacy argument when others have no problem with what's going on over their airwaves.
Just want to, while I'm thinking of it, because I know you and I both kept saying the same thing to each other. I don't want people watching to think that either of us are anti-police. I'm not anti-police.
Yeah,
I will be honest that I am often critical of things happening in our police department, but not because I'm anti-police. It's not that I don't appreciate the jobs that they do. It's not that I don't think they have very dangerous jobs. I mean, they're the ones who have to face the guy who's shooting somebody.
Sure.
But that doesn't mean that citizens' rights get thrown out the window in lieu of their tough jobs and what they do for the community. There's still things that are right and just, and I don't know if becoming secretive about what our police force is doing or not doing is good for the citizens as a whole.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's in the interest of community relations to be as transparent as they can be without putting themselves in immediate danger.
Well, and I think even to take that even a step further, it's hard enough to catch criminals as it is. Imagine if nobody ever chimes in. I mean, I know myself, in particular in the time with the heroin thing on my street and the shooting, I was calling the police constantly that day, telling them what was going on, because I knew there was no way that all those officers could see everything that we were all seeing. So all of us in the houses in that neighborhood had a different view, a vantage point, than the police on the actual street, especially early on in the scenario. So by encrypting everything, you're just taking all of the people out of the picture.
Yes.
So when you know that there's something going on, nobody knows that they should be watching for the guy in the blue hoodie who just ran down your street.
Sure.
You can't call and say, "Hey, I just saw him. He went into that house."
Yeah. So, so other communities have had this discussion, this debate over encrypting, and in the Estes Park Gazette from Colorado in 2014, they kind of had this debate out in the public in the newspaper, and someone published an op-ed, and they listed all the positive functions of having clear open channels, and that includes information on animals and wildlife. That probably applies more to Colorado than Manchester.
There's bears.
Access to traffic information to avoid areas. When there are sirens going on in the neighborhood, people can be alerted to emergency information that impacts their family's immediate safety. And also, when something criminal is going on, people can stay clear. And as you just mentioned, when the public has access to a call to be on the lookout, they too can assist the police and pass information along.
We can't have this police versus the community mentality in a wide range of things. In investigative stuff, that's not a good attitude. In just day in, day out police activities. I mean, if we keep saying we need more community policing, we need more interaction between the police officers and the people in the neighborhoods, yet we're going to shut down a huge, let's just break that link and throw that one away. We don't want that communication, because that one we can't really control right in live time. You were talking about having a public discussion. I don't remember everything. I know that might come as a shock to people, but I usually have a pretty good memory of things, and I remember the debate over spending the money on this system, because it was a big amount of money, but it does make sense. I'm not somebody who thinks we should never spend any money. I just think we need to spend the taxpayers' money wisely. And upgrading to a communication system that actually works in the long run does save money, because you're not constantly, having to troubleshoot and whatnot. I don't ever remember hearing, and we're going to allow the police to encrypt. And I know you and I both talked, and Tommy Katziantonis, who's an alderman over in Ward 8, he was quoted in the paper saying he didn't really remember any discussion of encryption either, which begs me to wonder who makes the decision on whether to to encrypt communication that the public can normally hear. I don't think that that's something that anybody that's not elected should be doing. I think that the same problem we have in Concord, where rules get passed by departments and people get frustrated with it, we say, well, it should be laws passed by the people that you elect to represent you. I think the same thing falls true for the city. If the aldermen vote to encrypt, at least you can hold them accountable. If it's just the police department who's just taken it upon themselves to say, we're going to encrypt, I'm not really sure anybody's ever given them that authority.
Sure. So in other communities around the country that have had this encryption debate, the discussion has happened before the encryption was turned on in a lot of communities, in the public, at city meetings, et cetera. The aldermen did vote on to keep the encryption after the police turned it on last week. So that actually did happen after the fact.
I do actually have to give credit. I think it was only Joe Kelly Lavasser that voted against it.
Yeah, correct.
Because it's, I don't know.
Yeah, so other, like as I mentioned, other communities actually did have the public conversation before turning on encryption, which does not appear to have happened here, especially when the aldermen can't recall even having the conversation amongst
I mean, not that I say every alderman recalls every conversation either, but I think I would have remembered. I think there would have been more pushback from the community if this, because there are people who actually just watch the aldermanic meetings, as torturous as they are. I'm sure I would have heard that the police were going to encrypt at some point. On the same note, but different, because I thought it was just interesting. It's always funny when I plan a show and I say, oh, Luke's going to come on. And then in Sunday's paper, there was an article about police brutality complaints. And I'm going to clarify, I'm not anti-police, but the AG's office says that in the past decade, there's been 28 reports filed with the AG's office about police brutality. My gut reaction every time I see somebody say that the AG's office is investigating is that it's really just a waste of time, because they rarely ever say the police have done anything wrong. There's been anybody in Manchester, maybe you might not have lived here then. We had an incident with some off-duty police officers outside Strange Brew Tavern, and there's a poor man who, will never fully recover from the situation. And what ends up happening, unfortunately, is these people end up suing the city. There's a lawsuit right now. There were some people, I'm not making excuses for people who do stupid things, but arrested on DUI charges, and they were in the police station, and, they were rowdy, and they were yelling and screaming or whatever they were. I don't really care. And one officer pepper sprayed them repeatedly. And now they're suing the city of Manchester. They're not suing the officer. He's gone. He quit. And, the number that's getting thrown around is $475,000, which actually is just a drop in the bucket. But I'd rather spend $475,000 on curbing on streets or fixing sidewalks than paying people who shouldn't have been treated that way in the first place. So there is part of me, if we're going to encrypt, we're going to know less about what the police are doing. So when somebody does file a complaint that they were treated poorly, how will this ever be? It'll always be the police versus the person saying so. The chance of having somebody else know about it is slim, because only that person who happens to be on the street the same time that the incident happens is going to know. Yeah. Because you can't even listen to the scanner and find out that they're going someplace.
Right. So we rely on the media. We rely on media organizations. Just one quick point about our last discussion about the public discussion. The union leader did put out an op-ed, opposing the encryption, and they specifically also pointed out that, the town didn't have the public discussion before the encryption was activated. But the way that, cities work, we need our press to act as a check, to provide transparency and accountability to the police. And, discussing these issues, calling for reforms is not anti-police. No. It's making the community better. It's making sure our dollars are spent more wisely, less dollars on lawsuits, more dollars on other things. So I don't really know how much time we have left. I really am not paying attention. I'm ingrained in the conversation. But for those of you who are watching, if you do want to chime in and let the alderman know whether you support
the communications being encrypted, or whether you oppose communications being encrypted, or if you just like to have a discussion about whether communications should be encrypted. If people don't know, they can always go and speak to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. They meet every Tuesday, but on the first and third Tuesdays of the month, we have what's called public participation, and anybody from Manchester has 3 minutes to air their grievances or pat them on the back or do whatever they want, but you can get your voice out there. At least let them know. And if not, shoot an email to your alderman or whatever, but it's kind of nice to go down to City Hall and face them face to face and tell them that, I agree with this, I don't agree with this, whichever side you're on. Let's see, I just lost my train of thought for a second.
Sure. Do you want to point out all the communities that have decided to stay open?
Well, I've got this list here. Thank you, Luke.
Sure.
Police departments with open transmissions. As you said, New Hampshire State Police. Nashua, they have upgraded their system and specifically chose not to encrypt.
Correct.
So they're like the second largest city in the state, and they're good with no encryption. Portsmouth doesn't encrypt. Keene doesn't encrypt. And then our neighboring communities of Goffstown, Hooksett, and Londonderry don't encrypt, and that's just the ones that we know that we're aware of. Some communities might not have a system that allows them to equip. So,
correct.
You can't expect Bow to make a choice because maybe Bow doesn't have.
But we also discussed that sometimes, when they've wanted to go off channel, they do.
They
via
do.
Cell phone.
They use their cell phone. I mean,
So-
they're police officers. They know what information they shouldn't be transmitting publicly.
Sure.
That's not that difficult. It's not like this is the only means of communication in 2016 is their radios. I don't know.
Yeah.
So
I think from a constitutional standpoint, I just wanted to make this point, is that the police do have the right to encrypt. There's nothing preventing them.
Yeah,
from
it's not like that's
encrypting.
violating your First Amendment rights or anything.
However, as we discussed before, there are, I found that at least in North Carolina, they have in fact passed a law around this.
Yep.
And basically transmissions by the police over airwaves are considered part of the public record.
Right. So in New Hampshire, we have 91A. We have right to know requests that you can file, and there's people who file them all the time. You can't have a public, the Board of Mayor and Aldermen can't meet in private. It's just not allowed. We have laws against that because the public does have a right to know. I don't know for sure, but I don't think that police communications would be covered under our right to know laws right now.
Will they be recording them?
I don't know. Are they just live and then they go away? I don't know. I don't know what the protocols are. This is not something I've ever really spent much time thinking about. So maybe if I knew a legislator, we should look at maybe clarifying our right to know laws so that if there is encrypted communications, are they kept? Are they available to the public after the fact? The same goes into effect. I don't know if you're aware of this. January 1st, the laws pertaining to body cams goes into effect. There's some police stations. I know it was in the article. Totally drawing a blank. One of them has body cams now, and the police chief says it's the best thing that it's like the best decision they made because body cams don't just protect the individuals, it protects the police officers. Because when somebody claims that the police officer has acted inappropriately and they have camera footage that says, well, here's how it actually went down, a lot of it exonerates the police to show that they aren't doing anything wrong. So it does, transparency is a good thing. If we know what's going on, we know that nothing wrong is going on. So come January 1st, there's laws pertaining to what they do with that footage and how they have to make it available and who they have to make it available to, so that they can't just say, yeah, we wear body cams and then only use it when it's to the benefit of protecting the police as opposed to benefit of protecting the public. So that's a start in the right direction, but that only will apply to those who have body cams. Manchester doesn't use body cams. I don't even know that Manchester uses dash cams. So, yeah. So we really don't. So now we will have I don't think, any record. Not even like of a dispatch.
Right.
I mean, I guess just.
what the police department did start doing a few days ago, I believe starting on September 19th, is that there's a record online of all of the previous days' calls.
I've seen some. I've had some people post those on Facebook to say, "Oh, well, this is new."
Yeah.
So
I think I don't know if that's a compromise or just a decision that was made independently, but that is. I will give credit to the police.
Yep.
That's more
that's
transparency.
better than nothing.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know that that's the same as knowing what's going on in your neighborhood when it's actually going on.
Right.
Manchester. I love Manchester. I'm in the process of probably buying a second house in Manchester. Yeah. People say, "Why do you stay here?" And I'm like, "Well, this is where I live. I've lived here for 20 years. It's just not. I'm not going anywhere. I like living in the city." I think this is the smallest big city I've ever seen in my life. But we do, classify as a big city. But it's hardly, we're not Chicago by any means. But that still, there's, Manchester has problems with crime. I live right next to the bike path, for example. There's a thing. So if there was something going on the bike path, where somebody who was running from the police could very easily just run up into my backyard, I think that's something I'd like to know about. I don't want to read about it in the paper tomorrow. I'd like to know that he can come in my backyard today, because that would make me aware of the fact that I should be on the lookout to make sure somebody's not in my backyard. I just think people have a right to protect themselves. People have a right to know what's going on in their community. And I don't think it's good to have an us versus them mentality. It just fosters less trust and not more.
Yeah. So I'd like to just quickly talk about what we can do going forward for people who are concerned about this. So you mentioned, attending the aldermen's meetings twice a month. I guess I wrote up my own personal wish list of what I would like to see, and I would obviously like to see the radio transmissions made public. If that's not happening, I'm wondering, are the police keeping a record, and is it possible for legislators to look at making, keeping those records, or, making them available on a delayed basis or something like that? Just, allowing some kind of transparency. We talked about it before. Some police departments in other parts of the country have actually given the technology to the media organizations, so they could still access. So at least
there would still be the important stuff. People would still be made aware that way. I mean, if I can't hear the police scanner, but I can go to Manchester Information and see that police are responding to a motor vehicle accident over here, or police are responding to a burglary over here, or police are, shots fired over here. I'm okay. That's, I'm okay with it being filtered through some non-police entity.
Yes. So that's another option. And, I would like to, for people concerned like you and I would like to bring this issue up again in, say, 6 months or a year, and just get, comments from the community, from the press, and also from the police, on what's been the actual, what's happened.
I agree. So for those of you who want more information about this, or have any input on this, and you don't want to have to go in front of the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, or you don't know how to contact your mayor, how to contact the mayor or contact your alderman, you can always reach out to me via email. It's manchtalk@gmail.com. I also have a Facebook page, and I'm on Twitter, so you can follow me there if you want. These are the kind of things that that when I started the show, this is what I want to talk about. I want to talk about things that impact our community. I can't emphasize enough, I don't want people to think that just because I happen to be critical of this specific decision, that means I'm anti-police. I feel like I'm one of those people who posts, I'm on Facebook a lot, and I feel like I'm posting a lot of negative stuff about police, but that's just because sometimes I think we get in a groove where we're making things that, I think they have a hard job, but I think they need to remember who they work for and what their role is, and that, communication with the community is probably one of the best things they can have. I know, a couple weeks ago, there were 4 cop cars on my street. I live on a little tiny street. So when I see a cop walk by on foot, it gets my attention. And I look out and I see 4 cruisers That's generally tells me that something's not right. And I went out and I walked up to, I am a legislator. I'm an elected official. It's my license plates are right there. If they haven't figured out that I'm a police officer or I'm a legislator yet, then I don't know how they're not getting it. And I'm a citizen and a taxpayer. I pay for their salaries. And I went out and I said, hey, is there anything I should be concerned about? And instead of saying, no, we just, there was a dog loose or whatever, they just go, no. And you're like, okay, well, thank you for,
You have
including
no idea
me.
what's going
I have
on.
no idea if there's somebody, running around with a gun. And sometimes I just think the tone and the demeanor, especially since we keep saying we need to emphasize more on community policing, but yet when the police happen to be in my community, they're not friendly to us at all. So we can't just have a handful of community police officers that it's their job to go out and communicate with the police. I think the police have to do a better job of communicating with the citizenry that they're protecting or that they're responding to, because, I'm not the only one who thinks that. I'm pretty sure the Supreme Court has decided that the police do not have any responsibility to protect you. They are there to enforce the laws and follow up, sadly, but that's the reality. They're not going to be there to protect you because they can't be everywhere. There's a city of 110,000 people and, 200 and some odd police officers. Obviously, they can't be everywhere. Anyways, I'm going off on a tangent.
Sure.
So
I just wanted to share one really great quote. So this issue was discussed in Stamford, Connecticut in 2015, and there was an editorial by the Stamford Advocate there, and John Brunig wrote, "Police do so much good in our communities. They also hold the singular power to deprive the individual of their most precious of rights, personal freedom. They should dignify that power by striving for transparency, not by embracing methods that shield them from accountability. Police have the right to remain silent. That doesn't mean that they should."
That couldn't have said it better.
Right.
That's really what it comes down to, is that we want better communities. We want, the people that we hire to help protect us and the people we elect to dictate the laws to remember that it's the people in the community, it's the people of our city, it's the people of our state that are the basis of all of this, and their rights have to be they have to be at the top. So I do appreciate you coming on. This has been a very good conversation. I'm sure this conversation will continue, and I'm sure there'll be other issues, and I'll have to have you on again because you're a great guest. This is Luke Mroz. He lives in Ward 4. If you have any questions, like I said, please do email me at ManchTalk@gmail.com. Otherwise, enjoy that September weather. The temperatures have finally stopped being oppressive. It'd be nice if we'd get a little rain to fill up the rivers and the wells, but meanwhile, the temperatures are gorgeous out there. Get out, enjoy a lot of the beautiful places in Manchester. Take your dog to the dog park, take a walk on the bike path, do something outdoors, and I will see you next week. Bye-bye.